Since simplicity is a goal, one of the ways that the PowerShell team attempts to meet that is by using things that administrators are already familiar with in order to do administrative scenarios with PowerShell. One thing that every administrator understands is drives and paths. If they don't understand drives and paths, then they're certainly not a qualified administrator for any kind of Windows or Unix system. And so the PowerShell has this thing called the provider model. And the providers make things look like drives and paths to administrators. And because they look like drives and paths, they're easy to navigate and manipulate. There are a number of PowerShell providers available to you out of the box. And of course, it's possible for vendors to provide custom ones, or it's possible for you to build your own custom ones. But the built-in ones include the file system, which you've been using the whole time. You've been using PowerShell anytime you change drives or paths. There's one called alias that you can use to manipulate PowerShell aliases and see the PowerShell aliases. There's one for certificates, one for environment and environment variables, one for functions, one for the registry, which we're going to look at in just a second, one for PowerShell variables, and then finally one for WS management configuration information. Now you'll notice that each of the bullets after file system I've included a colon. And the reason for that is because that is how you access the provider, by providing the name of the provider and a colon as if it was a drive. All right, so let's jump over to PowerShell and see how this works in real life. Okay, so here we are in PowerShell ICE. Now by now it should come as no surprise to you that PowerShell will help you find out what providers you have in a given session. And that's done with the get ps provider commandlet. All right, so let's say get ps provider. And we can see right now we have access to alias, environment, file system, function, registry, and variable. Now each one of these providers has a set of drives that we could use. So if this is truly consistent with the experience that a traditional Windows administrator has, we should be able to change to one of these locations by using cd. Right? So if we said cd env colon, right, it presents itself like a drive, we can see that we actually navigate to the environment provider. Now, how is that actually happening underneath the covers? Well, CD is got an alias. So if we say, what is the alias of CD? We find that it's actually set location. All right, so we could also say set location, and this time we'll go to H key current user. All right, so we're now in H key current user, and if there is consistency once again, we should be able to type dir and see what's inside of here, and in fact we can. And once again, dir is actually an alias, so if we check the alias for it, we can see that this is actually aliased to get child item. So we should be able to say something like get child item env, and check it out. Instead of showing us what's in our current container, it showed us the child items inside of the env drive, or the environment provider. So if a provider is a drive, it follows that we would navigate within a provider by using a path syntax. And you already understand this, right? C colon is a drive. If we're using the environment provider, then we're going to use the env colon drive. Within a drive, backslash is the root of that drive. Dot is the current path, and dot dot is the parent path. All right, so this is pretty remedial, but just to make sure you understand it, we're going to jump back over to PowerShell and play around with the path syntax. Okay, so right now we are at the root of HKey current user. And just to review, if we wanted to change the location to environment, we could type cd, or we could type env:\\. In both cases, set location and cd, we're executing the same commandlet. And when I execute this as follows, right, really what I'm doing is I'm using the default property of the command, which is path. Right? So this is the exact equivalent of this. Okay. All right, so we can go back to the HKey current user and go to any location inside of it by using path syntax. So we'll go back to HKey current user and hit :/, and you can see that ICE gives us IntelliSense. And so HKey current user / console takes us to the console item within HKey current user. Right? Makes perfect sense, exactly like what you're used to. And to go back to the root, of course, we can just say / and it'll take us back to the root. Now the rest of this is pretty simple. We have .. that refers to the parent item, and you can use that anywhere inside of a path, and you could chain those together. So if we were to say cd, which again is the alias to set location, and I'm going to get rid of IntelliSense here because it will mess me up and simplify what I actually try to do. But if we said cd console ... first it goes down to console, then it goes back up to the parent, and now if I hit / again, you can see that I have console as a choice because I'm back up at the top, and then system as a choice too. So this is the equivalent of this. All right, and then finally we have the .. syntax, which always refers to the current location. And so if we said set location to .. we don't go anywhere. And once again, you can use the dot anywhere inside a path you feel like. So it's great that we can use the drive and path syntax to work with providers and see what's inside of these different containers. But of course, it wouldn't be very useful if we couldn't work with those items and manipulate them. Right? So those things inside of a container are called child items. And you can dump out the contents of a given container by using getChildItem. Well, if you know that this is a set of operations related to items, you can use get command to find the other child item commands. And so if we were to use get command and pipe that into where object matching on the term item, we would find out that there are a number of verbs that can manipulate child items. So we have new child item, and set child item, and remove child item, clear child item, copy child item, and move child item. All right, so we have this whole set of commandlets that are used to work with items. Let's jump over to PowerShell and actually explore how these work. We're going to start by looking at the environment, and then we're going to play around with the registry. Let's start by using the get command commandlet to see all of the different things that are related to items. So we'll just say get command, and we're going to use the where object filter, although I'm just going to use the alias where, and we'll say where the name match, not math, match item. Now, match is case insensitive, so this is going to give us back every commandlet we have in the current session with item in the name. You can see we get quite a bit back, but some of these have nothing to do with what we're talking about now, like the ones from web administration where we restart web item. But we can see that we have a set of commandlets related to items and also to item properties. So let's start off and play with the ones related to items. All right, so let's just clear the screen here. And what we're going to do, even though we're in the root of C, we're going to use path syntax to create a new item inside of the environment. So in other words, we're going to create an environment variable. So this is going to take path, and we'll say env:// foo. That's going to be the new item, and then we need to give it a value, which is going to be bar. Okay, and now if we switch over to the environment, right up here, we can see that we have this item, foo bar. So if new creates one, then set must change one, because that's what the standard verbs are. So if we say that we want to set item, and this time we'll just say foo, because we're in env, and the value is going to become who. And so if we check it, we can see the value is now who. Right? And we can also clear its value by using the clear item command. And this time we'll just say path foo. And if we check it, it doesn't have a value. And in fact, it doesn't exist anymore. The behavior of some of these commands is dependent on the peculiarities of the provider. And in the case of environment, we're just dealing with a simple dictionary of key value pairs. And so if instead of using clear item at this point, I tried to use remove item, I'm going to get an error because it doesn't exist. In fact, in environment, remove and clear do the same thing. So if we go back and recreate this item, and then try to clear it, or rather remove it, you can see that the end result is exactly the same. And then the last thing, just to make this really super clear and drive the point into the ground, it's not just clear item and remove item that are the same in the environment, it's also new item and set item that are the same. But that's not always going to be the case, depending on the provider that you're using. All right, so now let's play around with a provider that's a little bit more complicated than the simple environment where we just have a collection of name value pairs. I'm going to switch over to HKey current user, and we'll clear our screen just to give ourselves some space here. And so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to run regedit, the old school registry editing command that you are no doubt familiar with. And I'm going to open this up, and I've already set this to be positioned on HKey current user console. Well, let's put this over here to the side, and then we'll dock PowerShell ice right beside it. And what we're going to do is copy this console into a new registry key. So we'd say copy item, and this is going to, of course, take the path, which is console. And let's just be really explicit. We'll use dot syntax here. And then we need to give it a destination, which is, we'll say is going to be console2. I don't know why I'm worried about the spelling. It doesn't really matter. All right, and that executed successfully. If I come over here to registry edit and refresh my display, you can see that we now have console2. Now let's check, by the way, since we're interested in consistency, if we say give us the alias of the traditional copy command, we can see that it's actually copy item. Right? So for the most part, all of the commands that you use in DOS are going to be aliased inside of PowerShell. All right, so if we wanted to move this, we could use the move item command, which is also aliased, of course. And the item we're going to move is going to be console2, and this time we're going to move it up underneath console. And so if we come over here and refresh the view, we can see that it's been moved underneath console, and then is now at console2. And then finally, if we want to get rid of this, we can use remove item, and of course we'll just say path, except this time we have to go a little deeper into console and say console2. And then finally, of course, if we check aliases on the move command and on the del command, we can see that it's absolutely true, that the exact same way we would have done this in DOS, we do in PowerShell, and it'll work, except now in PowerShell we can do it in things that aren't just files and folders. Most types of items have properties, and the property of the item is going to depend on the underlying .NET type. And so, for example, we have file info in the case of files, registry key in the case of the registry, and in places like the environment, it's just a simple dictionary entry, which is name value pairs. To work with these properties, we use, instead of the child item commandlets, we use the child item property commandlets. So get, set, new, remove, etc. and so forth. The specific behavior depends on the provider that we're using. All right, so let's jump back over to our demonstration machine and manipulate some of the item properties of some registry keys. So like I said, the behavior depends on the provider that you're working with. Here in the registry, if I do get child item, you can see that up here at the top we have name. This is a registry key, and then each key has a set of properties that are the registry values. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new registry value inside of the console in current user. And so this is going to be new item property, and the path for this is going to be where we are right now, which is the root of hkey current user, and then console. And since this is not an item we're working with, we don't extend it, right? Console is the thing that we're applying the property to. And so the name of this property, of course, is going to be foo, and its value is going to be bar. And PowerShell gives me some output to let me know that it did what I just told it to do. If we come over to regedit and refresh the display, we can see right there is foo and bar. We can change this by using the set verb. So if we say set item property, and once again we need to give it the path and the name of the property and its value, and executing this command, come back over and refresh, and we can see that it worked. It changed it from foo to who. And then finally, just like with child items, we can remove them with the remove verb. Incidentally, while I'm typing this, if you've ever worked with the registry through COM or .NET, you can immediately see that this is way easier. All right, so let's remove it and come back over to the registry and refresh it one more time, and just like magic, it is gone.